Okay, so I've hit the button and we are live. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give it a minute to let people enter from the waiting room. Thank you so much for being here with us. I am Antecisa Green. I'm president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, and I'm just going to give it 1 minute for people to come in, then we will get started. Okay, I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So again, my name is Antecisa Green, and I am the president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I am going to introduce our moderator, Christina Carter, and she will then get us started with our guest for today. So Christina Carter has 22 years of experience as a legal administrative professional. She is a 1998 graduate of the University of Maryland at College Park with a Bachelor of Science in Criminology and Criminal Justice. She graduated magna cum laude with departmental honors in 98 and returned to New York City to start her law career at Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom as a litigation paralegal in order to prepare for her intended journey of being an attorney. After a few years at Skadden, Christina transitioned to work part-time at Skadden so she could pursue her law degree at Brooklyn Law School. While in law school, Christina learned the true meaning of life not aligning with passion, so she returned back to Skadden full-time to embark on a full-time career in paralegal management. With 7 years of experience at Skadden, she left as a paralegal coordinator in order to continue her career path as a senior litigation paralegal at Sheppard Mullin, Richter, and Hampton, which opened an office in New York. While at Sheppard Mullin, Chrissy was part of a team that developed their new office in addition to managing large multi-jurisdictional litigations and developing the office's paralegal program. To further advance her management career, Chrissy went on to be the lead litigation case manager at a former international law firm, which has since dissolved, Howry LLP, where she began to see the true benefit of her rerouting her career into the area of law firm management. After 5 years at Howry, she took on the role at Ropes and Gray as the litigation paralegal coordinator, which enabled her to gain full exposure to paralegal management at the international level. In 2012, Chrissy took on the role as paralegal manager at Hogan Lovells, US, which has since evolved into a broader leadership role within her department. As Hogan Lovells practice support manager, Chrissy focused on the management of over 55 paralegals, along with the development of training protocols and procedures for those paralegals and the unification of policies for over 100 professionals. As Hogan Lovells practice support manager, Chrissy had daily interaction with senior level management, partners, associates, paralegals, and all business services professionals within the firm. After 22 years in the legal industry, Chrissy has realized that although she did not end on the career path that she envisioned when she entered college in 94, she has since realized her excellence and the reward in her exposure to the management side of law firms. Through her managerial roles, Chrissy gets to enjoy the sounds of law through her pursuit of a career as a professional with a paralegal foundation. And it's her belief that being a career paralegal is just as rewarding as practicing law, just from a different seat at the table. Chrissy is currently the chair of our newly established paralegal and legal professionals division. And she's also a very close friend of mine, which is why I went from Christina to Chrissy, because it did not sound right. But she is an absolutely phenomenal person, part of my inner circle, and keeps me grounded on a daily basis. So with that, Chrissy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Anta, and welcome everyone, and welcome Assemblywoman Alicia Hyndman to our chat today. So, just everyone, give you a little background about Assemblywoman Hyndman. Alicia L. Hyman was elected to the New York State Assembly on November 10, 2015, in the 29th AD, encompassing the neighborhoods of Laurelton, Rosedale, St. Albans, Addisley Park, Hollis, Springfield Gardens, and Jamaica. The daughter of Caribbean immigrants, Assemblywoman Hyndman immigrated to the U.S. from London, England as a young child. She spent her formative years growing up in Hollis and South Ozone Park, attending public schools, PS 34, IS 109, JHS 226, and John Adams High School. Prior to being elected to the state legislature, Assemblywoman Hyndman worked closely with community stakeholders as an active member of community boards 12Q and 13Q, serving as a member of the board's education committees and also as a regular participant of the Rosedale Civic Association. Additionally, Assemblywoman Hyndman served on the New York City Department of Education's Community District Education Council 29 for 10 years, the last 4 years as president. Leading the advocacy for the 36 elementary and middle schools in the district through collaborative leadership, she was able to bring in $30 million in capital funding for technology upgrades, facilities improvements, playground rehabilitation, and other amenities to enhance the quality of education for students. Assemblywoman Hyndman's professional career spans over a decade and a half with the New York State Department of Education as a senior professional conduct investigator, overseeing trade and vocational schools. She previously has held many positions in the fields of education and higher learning, including but not limiting to counselor for the Brooklyn College Talent Search Program, director of Minority Affairs at the New York College of Osteopathic Medicine of New York IT, assistant with the New York State Education Department Office of Higher Education. Assemblywoman Hyndman also helped create the Long Island Barber Institute, which graduated hundreds of Queens residents, allowing them to obtain jobs and become entrepreneurs, and opening dozens of establishments throughout the borough. As a longtime community education advocate, Assemblywoman Hyndman will focus heavily on bringing resources and information back into the community to support youth and senior services, alleviate flooding, grow small businesses, and provide access to living wage jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities. She will continue her advocacy in Albany as a tireless fighter for residents of the 29th Assembly District. Assemblywoman Hyndman holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the State University of New York at New Paltz and a master's degree in public administration from Framingham State College, Massachusetts. She is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She currently resides in Rosedale, Queens with her two lovely daughters, Naya and Nyla. Well, welcome, Assemblywoman Hyndman, and thank you for being a part of this today. Just to let everyone know, we are going to leave time for questions and answer session at the end. If there are questions, please try to hold them off to the end, but if it urges you to put it out there during this back and forth, feel free. We just want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So let's get this started. Assemblywoman, first question is, sets of questions are related to your background. We see here you're the daughter of Caribbean immigrants and immigrated to the U.S. from London, England as a young child. What do you remember about transitioning to the U.S.?
I remember it was hot. Well, first of all, thank you very much for
You're
having me.
welcome.
And just listening to your resume, I'm thoroughly impressed
Thank you.
of the work that you've done. Um, I remember I was 11, so it was kind of, it was intimidating. Coming to this country, everything we knew was on television, and it was the 80s. So it was definitely an experience. Like we were here a month and we went to Publix, and then my parents were like, okay, you're going to the school down the street. And as an 11-year-old trying to fit in, you talk different,
Right.
your mannerisms are different. So for me, I think what helped me was just, I was a, really studious young person. So my books and my family were my everything.
Awesome, awesome. And to see here, we know that you grew up in Hollis and South Ozone Park. What was that like for you? I'm from Rosedale, Springfield Gardens area, as you know, but what was being in the Hollis South Ozone Park area like?
So my parents, my mom's a nurse, my dad's a carpenter. So, they were working class and they were able to buy a house. And my mother basically did everything they could to repair the house. So it was different for me because it was an all Black community. And coming from England, that's not what I experienced. And I think it was a working class community. Everyone, we played outside. We got to know the block, and we made a lot of good friends in South Ozone Park. And we all went to the local schools, and that was like walking to school and making friends with people. That was important at that age, those teenage years.
Right.
And what I remember about the community is that everyone's parents were gone during the day because they were all at work.
Right.
Most households, both parents worked. You had a couple of neighbors on the block who were older and they were at home, so they kind of was like the nosy neighbors, made sure that the kids were doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Right.
But I remember in the 80s, it was crack. It was, Rockaway Boulevard was, we would go to the bodegas and get what we needed and come back. Our parents would send us to the stores, and they weren't really worried about us because we were always there was a whole bunch of kids all together riding through the neighborhood on our bikes. But I do remember, crack was an issue. There were shootings, but we didn't, as kids in the 80s, it was hip hop was a big deal. And I remember block parties were a thing. Like every weekend we were I was begging my mother was strict, always I was begging her to let me go to block parties, and that wasn't always happening. But it was definitely a great time to grow up in. And I just miss that my kids didn't have that whole block environment where the kids are out playing and so forth that I had when I was a child.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely different times that our children are in. So understand that completely. And what was it as you were growing up? What were you looking to see yourself do as an adult during those times? What was your vision?
So what's funny is that like people had career paths, and I just thought I was going to be a writer. I thought I was going to go into journalism. In high school, I was very active with my student newspaper and the yearbook. And I even took a class at St. John's where I got 3 credits for on Saturdays about writing. And so I just knew I was going to be a journalist. And then I got to SUNY New Paltz. So my first class was my freshman composition.
Mm-hmm.
And the professor said I was mortified. My first paper, he was red all over it. And I was like, I can't be a writer. This is not going to work for me. What am I going to do? And I found out about how to drop a class, and I dropped it. And I think that kind of went out in my head about becoming a writer from that first class. And he wasn't helpful at all. And for a freshman, I went to New Paltz. I didn't know anyone. I knew one person. And it was traumatic, right? And I had been a great student my whole life. I get there, this guy gives me an F, and I was just like, I didn't know what to do.
Right.
So that kind of went out of my head, but I was a communications major, and as I went on, I realized I don't know if I really want to do this. At that point, it was just about graduating. For me, I had also taken so many Black Studies courses because obviously in high school or my whole growing up, other than my parents, I didn't learn any like Black history, really.
Right.
So I ended up taking so many Black Studies courses that the chair of the department said, if you take 2 more, this could be a major. And I was like, oh, every chance I had for an elective, I took a Black Studies course. So whether it was music, arts, liberal arts, it filled all criteria, so I took it. So she said, Dr. Wade Lewis said, if you take 2 more, you can, this could be a major. So I took all the classes, and I ended up being a double major in communications and Black Studies. So while I was at school, I was also a resident assistant. So very active on campus, and I pledged Delta while I was there. when I graduated, I had the opportunity to do an assistantship to get my master's. I worked for the college, and I got my master's degree, and I went to Framingham State, Massachusetts. Same thing, knew one person, they interviewed me, not too many Black people in that they hired. So I was, one of a few faces, and I did 2 years there, great experience. I got my master's degree. So I graduated from, 2 degrees, $3,000 in debt from student loans. And, back then for me, that was phenomenal.
Right.
So, and then my first job after that was Brooklyn College Talent Search, and then helping young Black people get into college. And some of those students I'm still in touch with today.
Awesome.
And they're doing well. And it was because I knew what college meant for me and my family. And it was important to me at a young age to make sure I was helping young people get into college. And so I took them on college tour. So I kind of have worked in higher education since graduating from Framingham State with my master's. And my career path has been like, I've worked in education. I understand the fundamental need for it in our communities. And then I went on to work for the state education department in a field that dealt with making sure that all of the career and vocational trade schools throughout the state of New York are licensed by the state of New York. So if you're talking about ultrasound, bartending, dog grooming, nurse aides, barbers, cosmetologists, nail technicians, all of those non-degree granting areas are supervised by the state education department. And then I went to work there and I saw a whole host of us, people that look like us who either graduated with degrees and couldn't find a job and went back to these schools to learn a trade.
Wow.
Or people right out of high school who wanted, didn't go to college right away, wanted to get a trade and work and then go back to college. Or people who formerly incarcerated, new immigrants. And there's a whole area of education that we don't think about a lot, but a lot of people realize that if I want to get a living wage in New York State, I need to learn a skill.
Right.
And these schools afforded that responsibility. So me getting into politics was, I have 2 daughters. I went to public school. I volunteered for our school boards for our career. The Council for Educate. I'm getting my CEC, Community Education Councils, which are our school boards in New York City. I volunteered. I know education. All the electeds knew me in Southeast Queens, or knew of me because of the work I had done in schools for 9 years volunteering.
Right.
So when the seat opened up, William Scarborough, as you know, I don't know if you know, but anyway, his seat opened up in the 29th, and someone said to me, "You should run."
Wow.
2 people. And I was like, why the F would I do that? Why would I get paid more money with the state? Why would I do that? And they were like, think about it. And I thought about it. And I ran in 2015. Everything that I had learned, I think, in life up to that point helped me run for office. And I ran and I won. And that was 6 years ago. And if you tell me, I think this is what I was supposed to be doing. And everything happened according to that purpose or that plan.
Right.
And here I am now.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And you touched upon the trade side of working with the trade industry for the state of New York and that part. What specifically, what part of the work as your community education advocate included helping create the Long Island Barber Institute? So just explain a little bit more about your involvement in that creation process.
So a good friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Mark Neve, knew Christopher Felder, who was a barber in Uniondale, and Christopher Felder wanted to open a school. And knowing what I know, that all of the barbering schools in the state of New York were not owned by any of us, I said, I'll help you. So, we sat and we did all the paperwork. Went through because it was funny, like being an auditor or an investigator is one side, but then I realized there's a need in the community for schools that are owned by us,
right?
And where we are advocating for because if you think about entrepreneurs, how many barbershops are owned by Black men or Black women,
right?
And so we needed someone there to teach them you know, the trades to be licensed, because a lot of barbers are not licensed, right? So Christopher Felder, we did all the paperwork. He sent everything in, and then he got his license to open a barbering school in New York. And he's doing so well. He's expanded to beauty.
Awesome.
And the school is in Hempstead. And so I can go into any barbershop in New York City now, and a lot of barbers have certificates from that school.
Wow.
And that's because he had a dream and we made it happen. And I think about, when you're thinking about entrepreneurs, skills, he's trained barbers and they're opening up shops all over the place,
All over, right.
or have a skilled job that they're able to make an income and help their families.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what do you say, reaching back to your, your high school years, what would you say you could pull from your public school education that really enticed you into, when you look back now, that enticed you into being, in the advocacy for the community that you were, as you
So
were going through your path? What was it about it that
I
you could
think
tie together?
in high school, I was very active. Like, I wanted to be involved. And I remember telling my mother this, like, I had looked at the yearbook one year and I was like, none of the Black people, it wasn't heavily Black or Latino in the yearbook.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to get on the yearbook because I want to make sure that when I graduate, I see all my friends and, people I cared about. And so I got involved. And at a young age, I knew if you wanted to make a change, you had to put yourself in a position to make the change. On the yearbook, on the newspaper. I played basketball, so my team building skills. I played volleyball. So I was able to, at a young age, work with others. And that was, I don't know why it was important to me then, but I look back now and realized how all of those things built me up to where I am now.
Right.
And so for young people, I would always say, try new things, legal, try new things.
Right.
Get outside your comfort zone, because you can always get back to your comfort zone. If it doesn't work, you can always go back. But I think for me, it was about, if I want to see myself or people that look like me, I have to do something. I can't complain about it. I have to do something about it. So for my good girlfriends from high school who I'm still in touch with, they say to me, we always knew you would do something like this.
Wow.
And I said to them, well, how did you see it? They said, you were always, you were outgoing, you wanted to try new things. And I didn't realize it then, but now I look back, I'm like, well, you never know. You never know.
Right. And what would you say, I know we all have interests and pushes by people to say, do this, and you would be great at that. But what would you say with that push that you got from your support system to say you should run for that office? Yes, we have that push, but what was going inside of you to make you actually interested to pursue, running for the Assemblywoman position in the 29th Assembly District?
So sometimes it takes other people to see something that you don't see in yourself.
Right.
I just got a text. I'm watching this other Zoom now, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I'm going to see if they can put me at the end of this other other part. So I'm gonna
today,
do.
Huh?
I don't know how my staff did this, but we're going to work this out.
Okay.
So I think that let me just respond to him. Put me at the end. Put me at the end. Okay. All right. So where was that?
No, just no problem. I understand you're very busy. So no, just trying to understand, even though we oftentimes have support that recommends or suggests for us to do things, there still has to be something within you to actually take heed on that. So what do you think was in you that once you got that push to do the run for the Assemblywoman in 29th district position, what was it that you said, yes, I am going to do this?
Okay, so the two people, one of them is a very good friend of mine, Dermot, white Irish guy, very involved with the labor movement, and I've known him for years. So he saw me as a parent leader grow into, from being like on the board to being the president.
Okay.
And he said to me, he said, why don't you think about it? Why not you? He said, you know all the issues. You grew up in Queens, Southeast Queens. You
Right.
understand what people need. You pay a mortgage. You're a you're a mother. He said, why can't it be you? And I think
Right.
I started to think, and the next person was Senator Comrie, who said, anytime we need an issue on helping our schools, you're the first person we go to.
Wow.
Why wouldn't it, why not? And I called my mother, and my mom, so my parents were still, my mother's like, well, you run for office, does that mean you have to give up your other job? Because how are you going to pay
Right. That's all they worry about, right?
how are you going to pay your
Right.
bills?
Right.
And I said, that's another job, Mom. Maybe I could keep both of them. Like in my head, I'm already thinking, a so-called part-time
Right.
position in government. It's not part-time. Please
I
don't
can
believe that
imagine.
myth.
Right.
It
Right.
it is not part-time. So speaking to her, she said, well, if these two, if Dermot and Leroy are saying this, then maybe you should really think about it. And I had to pray on it. And I spoke to some of my good girlfriends. They're like, one of them was like, okay, what do we need to do? She was, her name
Awesome.
is Cherie. She was like, we're ready to go. And I was like, wait, I don't know how any of this works.
It works.
I
Right.
don't know
Right.
how this works.
Right.
I can't just jump out there. But it took them, and my girlfriends were like, you can do this, you've been doing this is just
Right.
on a bigger level, a bigger platform. And in the campaign process, meeting other people and then them asking you what your stories are, pulling out your narrative and realizing, oh, you did that, you did
Right.
this, you did the barber school, or you went, the DOE, and because education is important in our communities, how this works.
Right.
Yeah. And then realizing I had this skill set, and it took others saying that and encouraging me and believing in me, and
Right.
then believing in myself ultimately, that made it
Right.
happen.
And if they validated what you already knew, that yeah, I do have these skills. So that's great. The support system is always there. So what would you say is your ultimate like ideology politically? What is the premise that you run on, in your day-to-day dealing with the community and your constituents?
For me, it's community first. All the decisions I make is based on what my constituents want as a
Right.
whole. And I will say the average resident of the 29th district wants a good quality of life, a home that they can afford, where the property taxes are not so much that they can't afford them, that when their children go to school, that they're safe and it's a good quality education that leads them to college. Ultimately,
Right.
that's what my constituents want, whether they speak English or Bangladeshi or Spanish or French. We have, it matters to them when they go to the local store. Can they get good fresh fruits and vegetables and meat? And are the prices in this community the same as the prices in other communities? Are they safe from harm? When we talk about policing, police reform is ultimately what we need, but we want to make sure that when we call the police, we're treated fairly and
Right.
justly.
Right.
My constituents want to make sure that they can save their money, that they have adequate transportation, which is something that we're lacking. We want to make sure that when it comes to, especially now during the pandemic, when we're talking about a lot of renters who need assistance, my homeowners need assistance too.
That's right.
And I
Right.
think that, so when we talk about, in school, we talk about a lot of like the total needs of the child, but what about the total needs of the adult? And I think every day when I'm serving this community, what is best for them? It's really easy to get caught up in what you think is best, but that's not
Right.
it. It's what is
Right.
best for the community. So that constantly drives me when it comes to transportation, infrastructure, equity and fairness, great education, great areas for our children to play, for our homeowners to be able to walk out their house and feel safe and secure. Those things are important to me. And that's what drives me in my platform for my constituents every day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what is currently on your plate? Like, what's your prime legislation that you're spearheading or trying to get out there to spearhead?
So it's really interesting that we're recovering from this pandemic, and so there's so many so many bills that are, you know, moving in a way where we're addressing immediate needs, like nursing homes is a huge issue.
Right.
Pulling back the governor's powers is a huge issue. Making sure that, you know, people are getting there when the money comes down from the federal government for economic stimulus, making sure that we see the results of that
Right.
in the community. So you know, I have my agenda, which is I have a couple of education bills, I have infrastructure bills, I have, you know, one of the things that like I'm kind of, you know, I have my moments when like I'm really into, I'll give you an example of one bill that I'm really pushing, is that we needed to make it a state issue that we're testing wastewater throughout the city to find out where the pandemic spikes are before we see the numbers of people getting tested, because not everyone's getting tested. But if
Right.
this was if we put funding behind this initiative, we can find those communities and put resources in those communities first before we realize through testing that the pandemic, that COVID is an issue in certain areas. So that's one of the bills. And it seems really, but as I've learned about it, I'm like, you know, and that came out of our community was hit so hard with COVID that it took a minute with body counts, with sickness, with overwrought hospitals for us to realize it's a problem. But if we had this, it would catch that before. So it's, you know, it's kind of like one of those bills that's like under the rug, but will have so much impact into communities. And I'm thinking, I'm being selfish because I'm thinking about how it hit our community so hard. So that's so a couple of them, and we'll have some transportation bills, some higher education bills. I think about how pharmacists were able to give vaccinations for COVID and the flu, but I also think about in our communities when it comes to adult vaccines, we're not pushing, making sure that our pharmacists, who a lot of them are opening smaller outfits, not just CVS, how our pharmacists have to be able to provide care to communities. Because sometimes a lot of people, their first interact, they may put off going to the hospital or going to urgent care, but they'll see their pharmacist. And being able to give certain vaccinations, I think, is important for our community. Everyone's not all, you know, adult vaccines. Now, I'm not talking about for the children. Children should still be going to their pediatric physicians, but I'm talking about for adults who we know sometimes work 2 and 3 jobs, or their schedules are busy. Being able to get a vaccination at your pharmacist should be easily accessible for you.
Right. That's awesome. And you mentioned police reform and several other areas that you're interested in focusing on and you're driving at. But besides, you know, the COVID-19 and everything that's coming with that, what do you see as the biggest issue facing us as New Yorkers?
Oh, well, the biggest issue, I think, being New York City, I think, has become increasingly expensive. And I'll give you an example. A couple of friends of mine who have worked for the city are retired and have left New York. Why? Because their dollars go further outside of the city. So I think when we talk about affordable housing, but we're not talking about affordable housing when it comes to people who have homes, who need relief when it comes to property taxes, who need to be able to say like an extra $400 a month because your property taxes have been raised can be a lot for someone. So that's a problem. I think so when it comes to housing and home ownership, we look at it through the lens of only renters, but we need to look at it through a whole lens of people who are homeowners, being able to keep your home, save your home. For Black families, home means wealth and security. And we were decimated in 2008 with the the foreclosure crisis. So, you know, we are looking at numbers that I think lower than in the 60s and the 70s when it came to home ownership. We need to be able to build that back, and we need bills and incentives from city government and state government and the federal government to make sure that we're looking how Black wealth and how that works in Black communities has primarily been through home ownership. And saving that, to me, is just as important as police reform, as transportation, and as infrastructure. They all go hand in hand.
Awesome, awesome. And what are you doing locally in the area of police reform? Or what is your community talking about wanting you to help them get involved or help make changes about?
So last summer we did a lot of work around police reform, around, we marched, we protested, and what I don't want to happen is that just kind of all goes by the wayside.
Right,
And
right,
now we're here in 2020, and what has happened? We've seen some leadership changes, like two major leadership changes. I think one happened this week and the other one happened a couple of weeks ago, where Black men and women are in higher offices when it comes to police in the police department, which I hope translates into more police reform, right?
right,
The
right.
other thing is that we're seeing budget cuts in the police department. We were able to pass some legislation, and this is important. We passed legislation that had been on the governor's desk for years when it came to police reform. It is
Okay.
only through the protesting and marching that happened that we were able to see those bills now become law. That
Wow.
didn't happen overnight.
Right.
Also, I put in a bill for Juneteenth to be a state holiday. The protesting that we did last year
Push that.
helped push that.
Right.
Even though
Right.
the governor tried to take credit for it, it was
Right.
my
Yes,
bill.
that's
That was
true.
that was in before
Wow.
that was in before
The
he put that
protest.
in. So let's
Right,
be
right,
clear, like,
right.
that was my idea first. It
Right,
wasn't his.
right. That's right. Taking credit.
So I think we have a lot more work to do where we're looking at police. We can say they need more training, but if you're coming into a job and you're already scared of if you have racist tendencies, those don't always we can't always pick that up in all those evaluations.
Right.
But if we're saying that you come to the job and maybe if you have certain degrees in different areas, whether it be sociology, if you're looking into, you have to have, I think, 36 credits to join a police force. If we're talking about people who are going into social work and become police officers, I think they should get extra credit for that. I think they should be in blue, because we realize a lot of if you look at some crimes that have been happening lately, it's people who have mental issues
Right.
that are committing these crimes. But we have a police force that doesn't know how to address those. And although there are bills out there already that say that you have to call a counselor or call, medical help first, that doesn't happen in the space of time is when
Right.
the police department, if you're called out at 911 calls. And so there's a whole reform issue that needs to be worked on. And we can pass a lot of bills, but sometimes I feel like, the practical application of those bills is also what we need to work on. The law is passed, but how do we implement it? And I
Right.
think sometimes as a legislator, we pass the law, but I'm really always concerned, like, now how do we get this working? How do we get it, in the
Right.
departments to make sure that it's actually happening?
Happening. Right.
That's important to me.
Awesome, awesome. And what do you tell your constituents as to how they can get involved in these agendas that you have? What are some ways that people want to get involved to build relationships with you, and how do you recommend for your constituents and others in other communities to get involved with their local
So
regular government?
that's a really good question. One of the things, it's last year the goal was to do like advisory groups, but then COVID happened, so we couldn't. And then
Right.
we're all working longer days just because it's social media. We were like, Zoom, we were on all time. But I think advisory groups are always helpful. I'll give you an example. Like Juneteenth is now a state holiday, and on all the kids and state workers and public employees will be off.
Right.
Children will be off, but I don't want them to use it as a day off. So we're doing a borough-wide Queens Juneteenth Day, when I
Right.
want the schools to like incorporate what it is, the history behind it, and
Right.
why it's so significant to American history, which we
Right.
don't do enough of. Most of my constituents, I do a lot of Zooms now, a lot of emails, and I try to reply to my emails personally, because I think
Nice.
your constituents want to know how you feel about an issue, where you stand, and honestly, how you can help them. This pandemic, we've had a lot of unemployment requests, a lot of housing issues, and helping those on a case-by-case basis does take up a lot of time.
Right.
And the influx that we've had of unemployment has been scary when people are not getting in any income.
Right.
One of the initiatives we were able to start was a community fridge, which is on Merrick Boulevard and 232nd Street, where we have a fridge that's we rely on volunteers from the community to stock the fridge, and we get food pantries and we stock the fridge. So some days you may get a turkey, and some days it may be cold cuts, but at least, it's something in there.
Food,
And, personally, when I go shopping, I put I put stuff in there too, because I want to make food pantries that have set hours that they're open and closed. We have to make sure people can eat, outside of those hours.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, switching gears a little bit, as a Black woman and a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, what are your thoughts on the historic election of fellow Divine Nine member Vice President Kamala Harris?
So when Biden, so I just knew it was going to be a Black woman, right? I just, like, when I was looking at the finalists, I was like, okay, it's got to be a Black woman, because we just do so much. So right after the call happened, right after the announcement, I called up some girlfriends. One of them is a soror who's a very, very, very politically active, was a union, worked with NYSNA, the New York State Nurses Association. I called her and I was like, we got to do something in New York State. We got to get this out. And I called, and she called Assembly Member Latrice Walker, and the three of us stayed on a late night call. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and we said, let's do New York State Black women for Biden Harris. And in my head, I was like, if everything goes according to, in my head, Kamala Harris could be the next president, right? So we got on this call, and we had the first, we decided maybe it was a Friday night, and that Wednesday we had the meeting. We had over 100 Black women from across the state on this call. And it was just about, we are always tasked with doing the assignments, but not always elevated to those positions of leadership.
Yes.
So how do we make sure we get this done? So we had a lot of leaders on this call. We had Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, the Assembly Majority Leader. We had Tish James. We had Ayanna Presley. We had Karen Mosley Braun. And I think the thing that it taught us all is, like, look at the power we have. Now let's use it.
Right.
So for me, as a Divine Nine member, no matter the organization, the goal is community uplifting and pushing our members through our networks to positions of power. And look where we got Kamala Harris, and how powerful it is. Now, I'm not an HBCU grad, so can't speak to that.
Right.
Everyone did not go to HBCU, but I'm thankful I went to SUNY New Paltz, because look, I became a Black studies major, and that's important to me.
Right. Oh, awesome. What advice would you give someone who is looking to follow in the political footsteps that you took? What would you say is a way to get started?
Well, I think that the main thing that when people, if you're thinking being in office is one thing, but you have to have a heart for the people.
Okay.
Why? You have to ask yourself, why would you do it? Because there are so many different positions. Like, you can be a community leader and make an impact where you are. Like, I didn't plan to run for office. It happened, but I still would have been there fighting for children in public school. That wasn't going to stop.
Right.
And I think, if running for office is what you want to do, you have to have a strong constitution, because it's a lot of, it can be very fatiguing and frustrating.
Right.
But every day I'm just grateful I get to serve, and that's what keeps me motivated. It's not about the income, because you don't get paid a lot. I mean, in New York City, right, people say our salaries in the last 2 years went from $79,500 to $110,000. In New York City, if you have a mortgage and kids in college, like mine finally is graduating in May.
Congratulations.
So I can thank you. Jesus help me. And your mortgage in New York City, and what I do is I could literally work 24 hours a day, every day. And it's not a part-time job. I would say you really have to decide if service is what you want, not your name being somewhere, not like, this is a lot of grunt work, but I know the grunt work leads to successful community members. If it's helping people with a recommendation for college, if it's helping someone connect someone for a job, if it's helping someone get through a series with NHS Jamaica for a house,
Right.
if it's making sure we get programs for those recently released from, incarceration, those kinds of things. As a legislator, that's what makes me happy that I'm able to do this job, to be in those positions of change. And it's not always, hunky-dory. There's some days it's a lot, it's very disheartening. But
Right.
overall, the good days, the thank yous that I get, which are far and few between, make it.
Good, good. And what would you say would be a good way, once someone does determine that they have that interest and that burning desire to be for the community, what would be a good way to start that process to get engaged and to get really their hands wet into starting that process?
I would say that if you can do an internship, I would say that's a good thing. If you are involved in a church, I hope you're volunteering if you're in that church, just not just showing up on Sunday or sitting
Right,
in a
right.
Zoom. I would hope that if you're in a D9 organization, what are you doing as far as community service for that organization? Are you involved in the exec board of your organization? Like, I'll tell you, one of the things they don't tell you is about fundraising, which is a huge part. Every week, I'm supposed to
Right.
call people for money, and you
Oh,
have
wow.
to. It's one of those things that just comes with the job, and that, I think, was the hardest thing as a Black woman for me, knowing that
Right,
I take care of my bills, I take care of my kids, and I have
right.
to ask people for
Ask
help.
for money. Right, right,
That,
right,
I've gotten better at it, but I still don't like it.
right,
Can you raise money is another part. So if you're in an organization, maybe you should get involved in fundraising, because that will help you in this. I always shied away from it. So I would say, if you don't have to be a political science major. I met two young ladies about 3 months ago who thought they had to be lawyers to run for office. I was like, you don't have to be a lawyer.
right,
I'm not a lawyer.
right, right.
Excuse me. And I'm trying to think of internships are great. Your major doesn't determine whether or not you go into public office, but you have to have a heart for the people. And I think some interns I had thought that they were going to see me all the time, but a lot of time the entire district is my
Is your
office.
office, right?
So I wasn't always in the office, and a lot of the work that they would see is like the phone calls, the paperwork. That is also part of government. And
Right.
being able to deal with the monotony, I think, is another part we don't always talk about, but it's there and it's necessary. And
Right.
it helps put your office in a position where people know they can come and get service and help. Then
Right.
that's the success that we need in the community.
That is awesome. Well, this has been a very informative and enlightening in context of your background and what you do. But what is something that you think you could tell us, or that you want to tell us, that we haven't talked about? Something, that we don't know about Assemblywoman Hyndman, that you would like for all of us attending to kind of get to know and keep in the back of our minds about you?
That's a really good question. I think you stumped me. I think people think I'm like really social and outgoing, but I tell you, I like my alone time because I don't get enough of it.
Right, right. Oh my goodness,
So
I can imagine.
I think people think I love to be in the people will see me in the supermarket and be like, "You shop here?" Well, yeah. How else am I
You're
supposed
gonna
to
get right.
get groceries? So
Right,
I think I would just say that your elected officials are just like you. There
right,
is nothing special about us. We eat, we make mistakes, we like to sleep in late. I like a glass of wine. I think we're regular folks, and people have this perception. I think, and I didn't understand it till I was in the supermarket and I was online,
right.
and they're like, "You don't have a detail or a driver?" I'm like,
Oh,
"No,
right.
this
Right,
isn't.
right,
No, I don't. This is not what happens.
right,
This is not the job." So
right,
I guess I would say, like, we're regular folk, just like you. We have our bills, we have our mortgages, we have our kids, we have problems with our kids, like when my
right,
kids don't want to do their homework, and so or graduating, and I, you know, I'm so happy. I just wondered sometimes if she was going to make it, and she did.
Right.
And,
Oh,
but
congratulations.
yeah,
She'll be fine. That's awesome.
we're regular folk, I would say, just like everyone else.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. This has been great. Do you have a couple of minutes for any questions to see if
I
you have any
do.
questions for anyone? Okay,
I
great.
do.
Anta, are you ready for questions and answers?
I'm here. Yes, I am.
We can open it up now to any questions, and Anta will lead that.
Yes, so please use the Q&A function if you have a question for Assemblywoman Hyndman. One question that I have for you, Assemblywoman, is how can MBBA help you and other elected officials, reach out to the community, help fulfill your vision, and, just help generally with all of the issues that we are facing now in our Black communities?
I think this, don't assume that we know everything that's going on. Don't assume that, and I think a lot of people think like, I'm one person, I have a staff. The Assembly has a smaller budget than City Council and Senate, so my staff is not as large as theirs. Don't assume that I know everything that's going on in the community. That's just can't be possible. And so reaching out is extremely important, especially when it comes to ideas for legislation. There may be someone in the community that says, I think we should have a law for people, or we should have a dog park or something. Like, talk to us, let us know what you're thinking. Email, texting is always the best way. There's no that's easy to do. I'm sorry, they're flagging me again. They can away. I think for the organization, if there's ideas for legislation, that helps. If there's panels that we could be on like this helps. Next time I have brunch, real brunch.
Absolutely. Yes.
We're almost there. We're almost
right,
there.
right. I know how busy you all are and the work that you do. Any opportunities for especially for our young children to start thinking about careers. I think, I'm in the schools a lot. I know every principal. I know a lot of teachers. I've been around the education. And I think when we think about where there are labs. These are where children are like, wow, look at Christina, look at Miss Green, we could be where they are. And sometimes they just need to see that. As young as they are, you'd be surprised what they remember. So I would say legislation, don't assume we know everything, and just making sure that we're in our schools and that our children know that we were successful and where we came from is so important.
Awesome.
No, I think that's a great point, because I'll be the first one to be like, well, they should know, right? How do they not know? Not thinking about all the different balls that you guys are really juggling. I do have one other question for you. So we've just finished the most recent census. I just wonder if you have any thoughts about, just the entire census process, how it went this year, in particular, given, the pandemic and the way that everybody just was sort of locked up or quarantined. What are your thoughts on, what sort of results would come from, the census, given everything that happened in the past year?
So the former president and COVID really put us in a situation where I think we could have done better with the census. We had census committees. We had a lot of D9 orgs getting out there trying to get people to fill out the census. And there is this stubbornness that exists in our communities when it comes to people getting information. Trust me, if you have a smartphone, they have all your information already. If you're on social media, they have all your information already. The census is more secure than the stuff you put on social media. And I think trying to get that message out was super hard. So our response rate, I wanted like 95%. I think we were like in the low 60s, 70s. And it affects us because, New York State could lose 2 congressional members to states like Florida and Texas and California, who have a huge immigrant population.
Wow.
And 2 of those states are red states, but they still need those undocumented people to bump their numbers up.
Right.
But they were doing, so it's like it's this real contradictory situation that we're in, that we could lose seats we have to redraw our, and it goes by assembly district. This is what a lot of people don't know. In New York State, assembly districts dictate, once all the populations, once we're all counted, the assembly districts could be redrawn smaller or larger, depending on what the numbers are.
Oh,
So
wow.
right now I have approximately 130,000. My district could get a little smaller, or get a little bigger, depending on the numbers. But when you go upstate, and this is what we don't think about in New York City, there are 62 counties in New York State. When you go north of Albany, the counties, the square footage of a district is bigger because it has to encompass more people. So in places like Tonawanda, Ontario County, Chautauqua counties, I really want to make sure I know all of them. I'm going to try to find a song or something, like how we did with the kids in the States.
Right,
I want to
and
find a
the
song.
planets, yeah.
Right. So I want to do that, but I do believe we may lose a congressional member
Wow.
in 2023, 2022, 2023. Yep. I
Yeah,
believe we're going to lose someone.
It's going to be devastating.
I have one more question, Auntie. Can I squeeze it in?
Go ahead, Chrissy.
What's your position what's the position from your community and from yourself about the COVID vaccine, and what's been your constituents' response to getting it? I know they opened up York, for example, in Queens in general, to kind of get people out because the numbers were low. But what is for your local scene, what's going on there, and what's your view on the vaccine in general?
I have a lot of senior citizens who want the vaccine.
Right.
That's it. It's not, the demand is not really there for, I would say, my age, and I'm in my late 40s, younger. There's not a lot of demand. If you are a first responder, then that's different because you need it. If you're a healthcare worker,
Right.
that's needed. But I've even heard that even in healthcare, there are a lot of employees who don't want to take the vaccination.
Yeah.
So, we can't wait for someone else to take it for us to be whole. If you get the vaccination, you can still get COVID, but not as bad. You won't have to go to the hospital or be on a respirator. You should still practice safe and social distance. You should still practice safety measures and social distancing. So it's really, my seniors have been calling. I remember last week I was up late trying to get seniors appointments because they're more vulnerable. So
Right.
I'm hoping that your college will open to the entire borough on Wednesday.
Right.
And I'm going to go tomorrow morning just to see what the numbers look like before they open it up to everyone. So there's really this recalcitrant attitude about taking the vaccine as a whole,
right,
because of what was done to us in the past.
right.
But that is not the case now. This virus has killed so many people. I lost a really good friend, and I'm going to his funeral or, drive by on Friday. And when I think it could have been prevented, it just hurts me that he's gone now.
So sorry to hear that.
Thank you. So it's killed a lot of people, a lot of us. And it's not a joke. It's serious. And I encourage everyone who's able to now to get the vaccination.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for your time. We have no more questions on this end, but I just wanted to express, our thanks for spending this time with us, and just being very honest and transparent and really helping us to understand what is happening, your career path. Any last words? And by the way, that red looks awesome on you. I was typing in there. Roll 593. Hello, always got to represent. Thank you. Be up here. I'm like, next time I gotta wear red more often. I'm so. But
I was on a workshop this morning with the Deltas for Albany, because it's the New York Association of Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislators Conference. So we would do, that's going on now, which is why I have to jump back up. Usually we do it in Albany, the President's Weekend every year, but because of COVID, it's all remote. So that's what I did this morning. Hence the red.
There you go. I know we had our chapter meeting last night, Mount Clair alum. So I'm like just all out. But thank you so much for your time, Soror. It has been a pleasure getting to know you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christina, for being our lovely moderator. We have
My
been
pleasure.
Brunch and Learn with your elected officials since July. It's been awesome getting to know all of our elected officials all around the city. We do it at the end of the last Saturday of every month, and hopefully it's been great getting to know you, and we really appreciate you being here. Thank you to all of our members. If you're not already a member, please sign up and join us for some amazing Women's History Month programs that we have starting this week. Thank you again, everyone. Stay safe, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Great
Thank you
job.
so
Thank you,
much.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.